Just going to waive the formalities and just get right down to business so people know. This means to let Mr. Carpenter discuss the $11 million loan, and rural water is here to explain. So, Carpenter, Mr. Dench, want to decide? What's that? Oh, no, okay.
Kids do our
We're going to take a roll. Madam Clerk, call the roll.
Miller,
Here.
Harris, St. Columbia,
Present.
Epperly,
Here.
Davis,
Here.
Dr. Miller. Okay, you have 4 present, 2 absent.
Good afternoon, Mr. Mayor, members of the council and city administration, Mr. Steinberg, Arkansas Rural Water, Mr. Cole Glacier with Arkansas Natural Resources Commission. This meeting is called today for the purpose of the council hearing from Mr. Cole Glacier and Mr. Steinberg in regards to questions they may have as we're considering a water rate increase and sewer rate increase in the city of Helena-West. And there's a intersectionality that they're dealing with in terms of median household income and the rules of complying with Arkansas law on following a rate study that also intersects with the fact that our water department is underwater and that you can't operate at a deficit. And so kind of with that as the backdrop, we had a public hearing July 23rd, and the city council passed an ordinance raising the water and sewer rates, and that followed having a presentation in Lono by Mr. Sternberg of the rate study to Mayor Franklin and to me. And then we had a meeting on July the 2nd where Mr. Sternberg repeated that presentation to the entire council and to the general public. Then we passed an ordinance, and one of the things that was done in that ordinance was we raised sewer rates in an effort to comply with the median household income demands of getting loan forgiveness. And what we've learned since that time is that the sewer does not have to comply with that, only the water. And so I think at this point, we turn it over either to the council for questions or to the gentleman for presentation. But I think they're here to answer the question, but however y'all want to do it, that's kind of where we are.
I'm open to answer questions. As Mr. Valley mentioned, I was here July the 2nd, presented the rate study. Hopefully you all still have a copy of it. If you don't, I have one with me, but the numbers were provided by the city to me from Mr. Turner, recorder treasurer, and we worked up the rate study, and from that we made the presentation based on those numbers, and that's where those numbers come from. The only thing I will say in the rate study that we did is we did include that first $100,000 emergency loan. That is actually in the rate study already. Now, my understanding, Mr. Coklaser can correct me if I'm wrong, you really haven't taken that other 100,000 as of yet. So that wasn't figured in, so understand that. Then the other question is about the 11 million you've been approved for. That's not been included in this rate study. So if you have to borrow that full 11 million, that of course is going to have to be added in. And that's when Mr. Coklaser's agency will tell you what the rates will be. We've got a general idea what they will be, but until it's finalized, you really don't know. But I'd be open to answer any questions I have on my rate study that I presented. The only thing I will say on the water, I did present it and recommend you do it in 2 increments. The increase from $273 1,000. The first year would be $5.06, I believe, and the next year brings it all the way up to $7.39. So you phase it in. On the sewer, you were at $1.82 1,000. I recommended you going based on your numbers to $2.82 1,000. That will not cover any improvements you need on your sewer, and I can assure you, you have cost outlaying waiting right now that's going to have to be done as well. So understand that. We ran the numbers based on what we've provided at the time. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions that individuals might have.
One question I had for the record was,
as it relates to the numbers that you ran, did the treasurer give you information about the department operating at a deficit?
Yes, and that's why we were recommended raising increases. You know, if you go to the rate study itself, on the water, on page 3 of it, your revenue, total revenue, this is metered revenue and non-rate revenue. You had metered revenue of $1,804,588. You had non-metered revenue of $150,680 for a combined of $1,955,267 in revenue for the water. That's water only. But you had an expense of $2,697,675. You turn to page 4, you had a shortage of $1,176,063 in revenue to break even. So understand that. That's where your rate is adjusted on your cost per thousand. If you borrow additional money, we figure that into your minimum bill. So going forward, if you borrow additional money, that goes into your minimum bill to assure the lender that they get their money back. And I'm certain that's the way Mr. Colclaser's agency will do it, but I'll let him answer that.
And in your study, you showed that the city lost approximately 1 billion gallons in
73.5% of the water. On page 15 of 16, Helena-West water produced 1,428,034,000 gallons for the 12-month period. They sold 378,436,000, which showed a water loss to be a 73.5%. For every 100 gallons you're putting out there, you're losing 73.5 gallons. That was at this time. Now it has improved. You've done a lot of improvements. You've hired contractors. Rural Water's been over here to help identify leaks, but leaks continually happen because you have an aging infrastructure. I mean, there's no other way to put it. And they will continue unless we do improvements. And that's where $11 million that ARNC is here to discuss. What can be done with that?
Yeah, and I'll just kind of jump in on that. I mean, one of the things tied to the 11 million really is, even though you have a scope of work that you submitted with that proposal, is really understanding what your priorities are, which goes back to the engineer that you hired, developing a plan so that we understand what are the things that you need to fix first. I mean, ultimately, you got to get out of leak replacement or leak fixing mode and get into pipe replacement mode, because ultimately just fixing leaks all the time is going to kill you over time. So you have to get in there and start replacing pipes. And our hope is that the engineer is making progress on that so that we can work with you to figure out, the best solutions going forward on that. As far as the $11 million loan, anytime we do financing to any community or water system across the state, we underwrite them just like a bank does. And so, we make sure we'll look at your finances and make sure that you're charging enough, one, to take care of your system, but two, to also, repay the debt service back over whatever terms, if that's a 10-year, 20-year, 30-year loan. And in some of our email correspondence that went back and forth, what we show based on $11 million over a 20-year term at 4%, you're looking at about a 58% increase. That doesn't take into account the rate study that Dennis did, because those were done separately. So at some point, those rate combinations increases have to be meshed together. But we will, at the time of loan closing, which you all will need a bond counsel to close that $11 million loan. We also know you have a $16 million request in too, and the commission won't meet till November till we can figure out what to do with that financing request. But at the time of closing, loan closing, once we get through all the details, there'll be an amortization schedule that will show you the exact payment and, what your rates are going to have to be, all those different things, because you'll have to pass a rate ordinance to be able to close on the loan.
Quick question.
Yes.
How do we put those two things together? How long would it take for us to get, because if your rate study didn't include the second 100 or the 11 million, is it possible to get it revised so that it does
Yeah,
include?
we can revise it. I mean, I just need to get with ARNC and they'll give you numbers. They gave me some numbers to look at for that. But at the time, we just looked at the condition of the system for that 12-month period.
And I'll say, right now, you've been approved up to an $11 million loan, but it's not been closed. So you're not on the hook to pay it back yet, because you've not spent anything, you've not spent any of those funds yet. But once we close the loan, then the community will be on the hook for repayment.
And you might explain to them, once a loan closes, you just don't give an entity that amount of money to start spending. There's a process.
Yeah, so one, we'll run on a reimbursement schedule. So as you spend dollars for the construction or engineering, those components, then upon getting the invoices, you'll load those into our system, and then we can disperse the funds based on progress that is being made.
Okay.
The other thing is we don't charge interest immediately. So you're charged interest on the parts of the loan that you use. So you're not getting charged $11 million worth of interest. You're going to get charged on the part that you use, because let's just say some projects do come in under budget. So they deobligate whatever's left. And so you're only going to pay the interest on the pieces that you use, and you won't typically start repayment till, usually 2.5 years or so after closing.
Okay. But at the time of closing on the loan, you need the rates to reflect an amount that would repay the amount that's being borrowed.
That is correct. You'll have to have a rate ordinance that's passed, and that'll be part of all the documents at the time of closing.
Mr. Colclasion, everyone around here is elected officials, and we understand what you are saying. But for the sake of the public, can you take us through, okay, the public knows that there's $11 million is out there. Can you take us through from here through closing what has to happen? Because some people, there have been false statements about you got $11 million, what you've done with it, et cetera, so forth. For the sake of the public that's going to be watching the video, can you explain us from here until closing where we go?
So whatever the project is, it needs to go through the loan closing. You're going to have your rate ordinance. We're going to need some, plans and specs. We're going to need to understand what it is that you're building to make sure that it's in compliance with what you asked for the funds. And then obviously you've got all of your permits that you're going to have to do. So, I mean, if it's a water system, you have to get your permits through Department of Health. On sewer, you're going to have to get your permits through Energy and Environment, Department of Environmental Quality. So all of those things. Now, and also as part of the loan, you are going to have a referendum period, typically 30 days, when you're going to obligate yourself to that debt. And so, the first step really is hiring a bond counsel that can help you go through all of those steps. And I don't know if you have a bond counsel already. There's a lot of different bond counsels across the state that work with communities. That would be my number one advice, is get a bond counsel, on staff or hired. But you've also got to get a project designed. I mean, we need to understand what the project is.
And that needs to be prioritized.
Yes. I mean, really, that needs to be like yesterday. I mean, that project design, because you've got old distribution system in a very old water plant. And so, those pieces need to be designed out and understand what you're going to do and the timeline that it's going to take you to do it. That would be my sense of urgency for you all, is to make sure that you get those things done. But you have an engineer on contract, correct? Is that, so paperwork signed, he's on board, he's ready? Has he started designing parts of the project yet?
I don't know. I know his priority has been getting the well done. I don't know if he's started designing the project yet at this point.
A lot of these things should be happening at the same time.
Yeah.
I think that's what the director's trying to say.
Yeah, and you can hire a bond counsel at the same time your engineer's working on the design of the project.
So now that the council is aware that we start trying to get bond council and things like that together. Because I think they just want to have the information to know which way to go. And I think, you know, by you being here, trying to give them some insight on which way we should go, so everybody can have the knowledge and understanding of which way we should go. Because I'm saying one thing, and I want to make sure they hear from you on which way we should go, so we can all be on the same page. Because for the longest, we've been getting misinformation by people outside. So by you all being here is a help to us to explain to the body which way we're going. I think now that we know, that they know that it can be secured in on their decision on what they want to do. Because by them not knowing, you know, you're hearing this on the street, but they're hearing it from you all now. I think it's better for them. So I think I'm glad you all came. So I think that by them hearing it.
Yeah, this question for both of you. Considering Mr. Sandberg's statement earlier that he can update the rate study once he gets additional information, what will be the approximate time on the additional information to, as responsive to Mr. Ethel's question?
Oh, I mean, I can get him the information this afternoon, you know, after I leave this meeting, I can get him. We've already underwritten the loan. So we have our numbers. We know how much per meter size. And so we can just easily transition that information to Arkansas Rural Water Association for them to incorporate into the rate study.
And Mr. Colclays, when you mentioned you've already underwritten it, would that be that figure that's roughly $805,000 per year?
Yes, sir. So it's roughly about a 58% increase over 4,000 gallon rate right now.
Yes, sir.
So once we get all this together, can we, and the council's here, we need to make it available so the public can see and have another hearing so the public can understand what we're doing, so they won't be left out in the dark again. So I think you want to let them know what you're doing and why. So once we get your numbers and you, Rural Water, put all this together, and the council see it, I think we need to present it to the public so they can see what the next steps will be.
And let me clarify something, because that is a good point. When you merge these numbers, our numbers were based on that 12-month picture where it showed that you were not covering your total expenses and you was over $1 million short. That's why the rate increase on the cost per thousand has to go in. Now the debt coming on will be added into that minimum bill to assure. So you're going to see two things happen. Now the minimum bill won't have to be increased, and Director, you can correct me, until for the 11 million.
It's closed.
Until closing?
Yeah, we'll need a rate ordinance that's
Prior.
approved. Yeah.
Okay. So when you get ready, you know, we'll get you the numbers based on his numbers, but that'll have to, that new minimum, because we, in the rate study, understand the minimum, I said you don't need to change it right now, but you will need to change it with this additional debt, understand? And that has to be repaid.
So that brings me to another question. We can phase in the rate increase with the increases necessary to cover the 11 million. You need an ordinance passed. If that ordinance even phases it in at some point beyond closing, would that be sufficient to close on the loan? Do you have to have it actually implemented at the time of closing?
Usually it's implemented at the time of closing. Under 605, you have the ability to phase in your rate increase if it's over, for example, if it's under 50%, you're supposed to do it in a year. If it's over 50%, you can phase it in over a couple years. And then if the rate study suggests something different, to phase a rate increase in over 3 years, it's up to the rate study provider and really how much of an increase you have to have. But we prefer like ours to be increased, you know, whatever the increase is. If we say your rates need to go to a certain amount, then that's what the preference would be.
And I asked a question that may have been a little convoluted. If I can simplify it, you need us to actually be collecting that money at the time that you close.
No.
It can be phased in.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so I mean, you're going to pass your ordinance
Right.
for it, but I mean, I don't think you're going to be necessarily collecting, you know, at the very time of closing.
And that's my point, because that means we could, for example, take on the first rate study in an increase. And then if there's an additional amount that needs to be increased for the 11 million, we can have that in the same ordinance, but it's coming at some point.
Yeah. My advice would be is when we get a bond counsel,
Right.
and we sit down and actually go through all the paperwork, it's kind of like buying a house, then we'll finalize all of those things at that time. But that rate ordinance is going to have to be the full amount because it's the full amount to cover the debt service.
And so that we're still talking apples and apples, even if it's not immediately collected, it'll need to be passed in that ordinance. I think
Yes.
is what you're saying.
Yes,
Okay.
that is correct.
But the initial rate study I did shows you again losing over $1 million in operations. It needs to be implemented on top of rate increase.
Okay, so I guess I'm just. The new water and sewer rate findings that are on page 9. And I kept hearing over and over and over again that the $7.39 per 1,000 gallons is our absolute break-even amount.
Based on the numbers you provided.
Based on the
yes.
numbers we gave you. And so for right now, as long as we do that rate increase, and does that 738 doesn't include sewer at all?
No.
That's simply water.
That's
So as long as we do this for right now, understanding that I know we're gonna have to, for the 100, what am I saying?
100,000.
For the 10 million,
Right, 11 million.
that 11 million, that we're gonna have to come back, get a new rate study and all of that. But for right now, this
Yeah,
is
and we
what we
recommended
need.
it in 2-year phase. First year goes to $5.06 on water, from 273 to 506. In the second year, the rate study recommends going to the full 739. So you phase it in a 2-year period.
So year 1, 506,
And that's on page 14 again.
okay, and then year 2, we go to the 739. Okay. So
That was a recommendation in the rate study, which Act 605 allows more, if it's more than a 50% increase, you can recommend it being done in a 2-year period.
that's, I just want to understand that that amount is enough for right now.
Well, it
To
was
handle.
enough, it'll get you for what you spent for the year we looked at. You're in another year. I don't, that's why I say rate studies need to be looked at annually, especially in your condition. Just make sure that you're charging what you need to be charging. That's why we also said you do a 3% per year after you get up to that full amount. Because costs go up every year.
And
Mr. Steinberg, you mentioned 3%, and explain to the council, as you did to the mayor and me, why you said 3%, just a solid 3%, as opposed to following CPI as it fluctuates up and down.
Well, and that's exactly why, because the CPI fluctuates so much. We say a 3%, we've looked at it over the years doing rate studies, that a 3% increase per year is a lot easier for customers to accept, and it helps cover your cost of inflation. All these water parts you're buying, the cost have went up drastically. You can ask your superintendent, Mr. Valley can tell you, every part you buy is continually increasing. So if you don't keep up, all you're doing is digging yourself back in the hole again. We want to get you to solid ground and moving forward.
And I say this, y'all have to remember we're still on bypass pumps for sewer. So we really, really, really need to raise sewer because from Mrs. Davis and Mr. Etherly and myself, when I was on the council, we spent over $1.2 million on bypass pumps. Ms. Davis, do you remember when we had this, we had gotten charged $800,000 for bypass pumps. The city was on nothing but bypass pumps. So a lot of your American Rescue Act money went to bypass pumps. Am I correct, Ms. Davis and Mr. Etherly? And that's where most of the money that we got, I think probably like right $1.5 million probably went on bypass pumps, strictly that. So if we don't raise sewer, we're still gonna be in the same situation that, we got out here at the pump, out here at the industrial park. It's a bypass pump over there, and over here by the Cleo Dunning's Park, there's another bypass pump, and we kind of
Mentioned Eliza Miller.
yeah, Eliza Miller. So we have to do something with sewer, and we gotta do something fast, because that's where your money's going. A big chunk of money we could have done something else with. But, you know, at the time, the council was surprised by the $800,000 that we had to spend on bypass pumps. And we're still on bypass pumps to this day. So my suggestion is I know that when you talk about water, sewer, the public don't really understand that, you know, these pumps push the water push the sewer where it needs to go. And you have sewer ponds out there on Little Rock Road, so that it has to push all that stuff there. So we need to make sure that the water department can be solvent, but you have to factor in sewer is important. And then you got your sanitary drains. You gotta factor all those things in. It's a lot to this. And if I hadn't been on the city council for all those years to know that you have a sanitary side, sewer, water, it's a lot to come to match up with. But it's kind of, at this point, we have to do something that's going to pull us to where we can be much better than what we are. And we have to explain this to our customers on what's going on. That's why there are videos that I've taken and tried to make sure that upload to Facebook to show people what's going on, because people really, you talking about it, they don't really understand it, because, you know, I had to see it. So I'd be more than happy to make sure y'all get to see these, where these sewer ponds are and things like that, how we're on bypass pumps. Because at one point we was on 8 bypass pumps. So I think we're down to 4, if I'm correct. So.
Well, that brings me to another question. So, you know, I understand that your recommendation was every January that we do a 3% increase to account for the cost of living. I understood that. We received the email from the city treasurer. And so one of the things I understood, because Mr. Sternberg told us, you know, listen, as far as the sewer, you know, it's adequate for right now. You're holding on, but don't, you know, get excited, because that's an issue you're going to have to deal with, if I remember correctly. And so the treasurer said that we could do the $1.82 to $2.82. So would that help us with the cost versus what was implemented before the moratorium?
I think, to me, I think what we implemented will greatly get us where we need to be, because the treasurer he's not here, so I can ask him. But I think what we implemented the first time on sewer will really help the city get to where it needs to be, because we got a lot of Haitian infrastructure, and sewer it's gonna be next to Flash. So we need to try to get ahead of this now or deal with it later. But I think right now we should focus on water and sewer together at a comfortable number, so that when these two gentlemen put their numbers together, we can make sure we can pay this loan back, and we make sure we start getting our bypass pumps, make sure we start having money to put back, so we can make sure we can maintain the system. Because, you know, again, the governor also said that it gave us 3 things to do. We have to make sure that we pay a person two people $50,000 and a $100,000 salary. So how are we going to implement all this in there together? So what we have to do. So it's a lot. So you got all these numbers. Somebody gave you these numbers to put out. You got these numbers. You got an $11 million loan to factor in. You got these, $200,000 worth of salary that you have to factor in. And then you got to make sure the people who are working, how do you factor in and give them raises to make sure they do what they need to do. So it's a whole lot we have to factor in to make sure that we can be in compliance.
Let me ask you a question on your sewer side there. Again, the rate study was looking at that 12-month picture, and that $1.82 and the recommendation that your present rates are to go to $2.82 was just getting you to the break-even amount. You're looking at another funding issue where you're going to have to go and come back to Mr. Coatclaser and his agency for the sewer. You need to have your engineer design something and give some cost estimates on what it's going to take to correct those pump stations that's existing that you got bypass pumps on. Because every pump station has to have at least 2 pumps. Because if one goes down, you always got another one and you should be fixing the one. But you've got to the situation where they went down, both of them, you didn't fix them. You got another one went down and you didn't fix them. That's going to take an additional loan and do it correctly. A bypass pump is just getting you by. That's all it's doing. It's a waste of money, in my opinion. Bite the bullet, you do the loan, make the corrections. But I just want to make sure you understand that the dollar increase was just getting you to the break-even amount for that 12-month fixture.
No, I'll add to that. I mean, I can't reemphasize enough, and I know Dennis shared the same thing, but I mean, having your engineer tell you what you need to fix first and start moving down that road sooner than later is really where you need to go, because you have to start fixing some of it. And until the engineer can lay that out for you, I mean, you have nebulous dollars, nebulous timelines, those sorts of things. So that really needs to be nailed down by your consulting engineer to help you do that. Because you're going to have to do it in phases. There's no doubt.
And then you have justification for a rate increase, because you know a dollar amount you're going to have to borrow to fix and make the corrective actions you need. Because you've got energy and environment that's going to be looking at you on that wastewater side, and I'm certain they already are.
Can the 11 million that we've already been approved for, is that just water, or can that cover any sewer projects?
That was just water,
Just water.
because that was out of the drinking water state revolving fund.
Now, you said there's a meeting in November, Mr. Coclaser, about another $16 million.
Yeah, you all submitted a request for 16 million, and I believe it had kind of a combination of water and wastewater, both in that request. And the thing is we will be doing principal forgiveness funding. So that's one time a year that we do principal forgiveness, is in November. Now, your current rates as they are, you're not at the rate that you need to be to qualify for principal forgiveness. Because the thing is, and you can do a rate increase to do it like before the meeting, but I mean, the thing is typically if we look at 1.5% of the median household income based on your LMI or over 50%, then you'll have to meet the 1.25. So 1.25% of your median household income needs to be spent on water, and 1.25% needs to be spent on sewer to qualify for principal forgiveness, just to be eligible in the state. So, but right now you're not at that. I think our last calculation, you were at 1.17 when we ran your numbers back in for the February $100,000 emergency loan and the $11 million loan.
And is that 1.17 for water or for sewer?
That was for water.
Right. Do you have a calculation of where we are on sewer?
I do not know where you are on
So
sewer.
it's gonna be less.
Mr. Coclaser, just for the record, are you saying that we need to have this before November for that to be, for that 100,000 apply?
I mean, your rates need to be at a point that makes you eligible. But I mean, that's not, let's face it, that's not that big of a jump from 1.17 to get to 1.25. But you have, I mean, you need to be in compliance with 605.
Correct.
Granted, your due date is not till 2026 for
Right.
your rate study, but you have a lot of infrastructure issues and you're running in the negative. So I would say that a rate increase is probably needed as soon as possible. Then you can worry about the debt service as we approach closing. I mean,
Mhm.
because you have a year to close. Typically, we have a year to close the loan. Now, we approved yours in February. And so to guarantee your rate, we ask that you close in 12 months. So February of 25 is not that far away.
That's correct.
And Mr. Coclaser, I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, there was an intersectionality of the need to raise our rates. And also there's a constitutional provision, I believe it is, that requires us to not operate at a deficit. So there's a statute that says you can raise the rates over 2 years, but the Constitution says you can't operate at a deficit. So, well, those two things, how do they mesh, or do they mesh at all?
I mean, my advice would be not to run in a deficit. So you're gonna have to get your rates up where, I mean, typically even when we underwrite, we're looking to see what does it cost to maintain your system, your M&O cost. And then you have to sufficiently fund M&O, maintenance and operation costs, and the debt service.
Right. So in that instance, if I'm hearing what I think I'm hearing, then the rate study is to break even. That is, don't operate at a deficit. Then you wouldn't break even by doing it over 2 years. You'd have to do it the first year.
Well, and there's Dennis, do you have the refurbishment account? Is that
Yes,
calculated in?
it's in the rate study for both water and sewer.
Under 605, you have to put 5% in a refurbishment account. So that's
Right.
above and beyond what your maintenance and operation costs are.
And on your water for that year we looked at, that 12-month picture, your refurbishment replacement account is based on 5% of your total income. Well, your total income, as I mentioned, was $1,955,268. So you take 5% of that, that's $97,763 that you'll be funding into a refurbishment replacement account that you can use to fix pumps, to replace lines on water. On sewer, you do the same thing, and your refurbishment and replacement account, again, is based on the 5%, which is,
Who has a net positive on that?
you had a total of $920,714 in annual revenue on sewer, and the refurbishment replacement account would be $45,035 for sewer. And that's on page 6 on the sewer at the bottom.
So are you suggesting that replacement and refurbishment account would get you out of the trouble of operating at a deficit for that 1 year while you were gradually raising the rates?
Well, it actually does get you out of that deficit, that 5%, because you're required to fund it now. But you've got to get the rates adequate to fund it. That's where we're making the recommendation to get it to be able to fund that. You have to have it to the minimum of what we're recommending.
And is that minimum the 506 for the first year, or the minimum is the 739 total?
The 739 on water is the total. That's in
Right.
a 2-year period. Now, you can do it in 1 year, but we recommend, because it allows the Act 605 allows it to be implemented in 2 years if it's more than a 50% increase.
Yes, sir.
Yours was on cost per thousand.
Yes.
So that's why we recommended it 2 years.
Yes.
On the sewer, we said you're going from $1.82 to $2.82. That's not more than 50%. So
Right.
therefore you implement it in a 1-year period. But that doesn't get you to the 1.25 that Director Colclaser is talking about on the low to moderate income.
You said it does not get us
No,
to the.
That's,
And I don't have the sewer rates in front of me, so I couldn't tell you on what your sewer rates are. But I know looking at your water rates, your rate burden factor was 1.17. You would need to be at 1.25.
so is your water rates, just for clarification, still the minimum is 1620 for residential?
It's actually 1674 residential. It was 1620 the year you looked at,
Okay.
but it had been raised by CPI to 1674.
So you have an automatic CPI calculation that you figure in each year?
Yes, sir.
And now it's 1674?
Correct.
And you do the same on sewer, automatic?
Yes, sir.
And the sewer was 927, I think.
Yeah, I believe it may be 988 now. I'd have to go back and look. I think.
But those numbers, that's why we need updated numbers to make sure we're doing the calculations correctly. Be able to tell you what that 4,000.
Do you have a date when the November meeting is?
Yes, it's November. I want to say it's the 20th. I can tell you for sure. Just give me 1 second. Here's the thing too, that you have to understand is you have an outstanding $11 million loan. The principal forgiveness, if you were considered for it, would be on the 16, not the 11. So you depending, and you can't use the 11 and the 16 on the same thing because you were already approved for a project at the $11 million loan. So if it was the same thing, you would almost have to deobligate the 11 and take your chances on the 16, that you would get some portion of that in the form of principal forgiveness. I can't guarantee you that, you'll get anything because there's 70 some odd applications for the November meeting. And we have a limited amount of funds and we fund down a project priority list. But to be even considered, your rate burden factor would need to be at 1.25 to even be considered.
Mr. Sternberg, the sewer rate this year is $9.58 for the first 1,000 and $1.88 for each 1,000 gallons after that.
And that 273 on water increased as well.
Yeah, water 1674 and 282.
282.
Now, I will just confirm that the commission meeting is November 20th in Little Rock.
Thank you.
So I will say, I'll get back with Director Cole-Claser on the loan to make sure we have the same numbers and give you an update on that. I can email it back to the council on the 11 million.
Yes, sir.
Do you want the 100,000 emergency figured in as well or not?
Yes, we're in the process of drawing it down.
We need to figure that.
Yeah, I think we 96.
$96,000 is what we've drawn in, balance of $3,700 remaining.
Okay.
So we that's in the works. We applied to get it. It hasn't made it to us yet, but it'll be funded within the next 10 business days or less, my understanding.
So you're working with my staff on all the document requirements right now?
Yes, sir. I had a conversation with Ms. Amy Duriak
Yes.
yesterday, and I'm also getting in contact with Ms. Andrea Johnson and Ms. Jones.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
All right. Are there any other questions from any other council member?
It's a lot to take on, but you've got to keep moving. And, your engineer is the main thing that needs to be moving now on the projects to get a priority on what needs to be done. And, continually fixing leaks isn't the answer. We need to start replacing pipes.
And Mr. Cole-Claser, this may be a little backwards, but I don't think we asked you to introduce yourself to the audience so they know who you are. The council requested the key players in this process. The loan and grant process would be you, and the rate study process would be Mr. Sternberg. But could you just give our audience a little background about you and what you do and which division of state government you're operating in?
Sure. I'm Chris Cole-Claser. I'm the director of the Natural Resources Division of the Arkansas Department of Agriculture. So we administer roughly 6 programs, 3 federal, 3 state, for assisting water and wastewater systems with financing. And so we work with communities all across the state on water and wastewater financing. Current portfolio is about $2.5 billion in grants and loans, or loans and principal forgiveness all across the state. We've been fortunate to receive some federal funds that we've been able to distribute. But right now we're seeing a major water and wastewater funding. A lot of that I think is Act 605 because folks, we have primarily loan tools. And a lot of communities now can afford to take on the debt to fix their infrastructure. And there's a lot of water wastewater funding projects going on right now across the state. We've done, like I said, 450 projects in 3 years. So a lot of projects out there. But we assist communities all across the state. We're happy to be here to help you. We've had lots of conversation with Mills, the mayor, and others, just trying to help you navigate the situation that you're in. And, we'll stay committed to trying to help you through this. There is another thing that I want to mention. Act 605, to be in compliance, you have to have a rate study and you have to implement. The other thing that you have to do is your water board has to be trained, has to receive 8 hours of training. And you don't have a water board, you have a city council. And so that means the city council, the majority of the members, it could just be a simple majority, but they would need to have taken the training and the 8 hours of training to stay in compliance with 605 as well. Those reports are due every January. And so, we get the reports from communities on their, or water systems on their water boards attending training. And so Dennis provides training through.
We actually have graduates.
All right.
Yeah.
One thing we need is just the report, is the number of members that have gone through the training, because we actually keep track of that as well under 605 as the agency that administers that program.
Any more questions?
I just want to say thank you so much. I think that it's always helpful when, this body, our mayor, our chief of staff, our city attorney, all the members, when we make every effort to try and make everything as transparent as possible. I think that is helpful. You've certainly answered a couple of questions that I had. I called myself studying and I went back and looked at the videos over and over and over, and I had all these questions, but then, just that piece of information that, go yet back to the table because of the 11 million, and we may have to do the rate study again. And so it's just it's an ever moving project, going on. So I just wanted to say thanks. I mean, I found it helpful for me, for sure.
You bet.
And I would say the same, thank you, because what she's not saying directly is that we also have to build trust with the community.
Yeah.
And we need them sometimes not to hear from the elected officials that people have a low bar of trust for, but from somebody who's not, as they say, from here.
Right.
Tell us exactly what we need to do so that when we actually do it, they understand how we got here.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, sir.
I drove out by the new well today. They're finalizing it with the mission control, hooking it all up so it'll all be automatic. I sat in here several different council meetings where the city approved to do the well and set aside money. I mean, it's nearing completion. So do we have those funds? We do. Good. I just want to make sure. That's, I don't know what the total cost was, but
Right at $1.4 million.
Yeah.
I think the
and
treasury.
people, I guess the reason I bring that up, just to make sure people understand, there is a major cost to just
Yes, sir.
the well itself.
And we didn't take out a loan. We pay this way when this well is done to be paid for with cash, our own money. So we have to borrow anything. And I think people have to understand that you all around this table made tough decisions for this well. And I mean, you all should be commended for trying to make sure we save this community. And what you all did, you all deserve the city council and the administration deserve a standing ovation for getting out here to make sure we got this well completed. And we're right at completion. So my hat's off to you all, and thank you all for thinking about the citizens, because we can get caught up in this thing of people, but you all got caught up in taking care of the community. So we all here because y'all really need to take care of the community for us on that. And I appreciate that, because we would not have a well if you all hadn't. A lot of y'all took heat for this well. A lot of people had a lot to say about what we were doing, but you all should be commended, because now we have a functioning well at 1,200 gallons a minute. So that is something that 1,200.
Yes.
That's more than they estimated.
Yeah.
Well, the estimate 800 came at 1,200.
So I think that
That's
you're,
great.
so I tell you, anybody who's got something to say, this city council is a bunch of shakers and movers, because we got a well.
Mr. Colclays and Mr. Sternberg, I want to thank you all as well. One point of personal privilege that I would like, Mr. Etheley said it once. One of the things that I think the citizens need to understand is what is the status of our infrastructure? Because we have a long way uphill. And I think that it would be good for them to hear it from someone other than us to tell them that, hey, this is the beginning of the journey. As I described to a group of people the other day, getting the well, if this was a car, and we run out of gas, getting the well, just simply turn off the gas light. Really not even a quarter of a tank full, and we still got to go all the way to being full. But I would invite any comments you all have about the infrastructure, the need for infrastructure, and long term, that this is something, because these rate studies, my opinion, I've said before, said we're going to be constantly having to look at rates, and people have to get used to the notion of the bills are going to be constantly going up, because there's a lot to do in infrastructure. I would invite any comments from each one of you.
Well, unfortunately, I can make a lot of comments because me and my staff have been over here quite a bit.
This is precisely why I wanted
I
to sit with you on the ground.
Thank you. But for the last year and a half, but the bottom line is you have an aged infrastructure on water and wastewater, both sides, that honestly has had neglected maintenance for years, and it's caught up. You know, rates were too low. Rates should have been looked at back then and continually adjusted to where you don't see a major increase. And hopefully you could have maintained. The water treatment plant on the West Helena side is the one I'm most familiar with. I've been to the Helena water plant as well, but you need major infrastructure upgrades there. You can have a well, but if you can't get that treatment plant to process that water, you're still shutting down because the filters are not adequately taking care of it. So they have to wait, and your high service pumps are out pumping what the treatment plant can produce. So you shut down until that clear well fills back up. And then it can start pumping back out to your system, your tank you're talking about. You had wells that depleted in capacity that actually continually declined. One of them completely failed. So that's why the emergency need was for the well that you guys did. And I commend you for that. It actually came in higher than what was projected, and that's great. But the wells can provide the water, but if you don't have a treatment plant that's adequately operational and maintained, you're still going to have problems. Your distribution system is in serious need of help. Your main distribution lines, all your old 2-inch galvanized lines need to be replaced. That isn't going to happen quickly, and it won't happen cheaply. As you mentioned, we talked about the $11 million for water. That's water only. You've got the same problems, I can assure you, on the sewer side. I've heard enough about pump stations and bypass pumps and how long you've been running on them. That's infrastructure that you can't afford. Once you have both pumps, and a lot of larger lift stations have 3 pumps in them. And they'll pump different varied amount of water, wastewater, based on what the flow will be coming into it that's projected. But all wastewater collection systems are going to have what they call I&I, infiltration and inflow. When you have heavy rains, your treatment, your collection lines fill up. Your pump stations have to be adequately sized to produce the pumps to put the water back to the wastewater plant. Yours is, well, you got pumps down in 4 different lift stations. I just heard you're using a bypass pump. That bypass pump probably won't be able to keep up all the time. All these things need to be addressed, and it goes back to what Director Colclaser said. Before you can get funding, we've got to have plans, specs, priorities, what you're going to fix, why you need to fix them, what is the cost estimate. That all has to come to them to approve the dollar amount you might need, and whether you get principal forgiveness or have to take loans, but you have to have it fixed. And guess what? It has to come from rates, the rate payers. And it's no different than any system in the state. They have to come up with those revenues, and the revenues come from water rates and sewer rates. And you need to look at both entity, water and sewer, as a separate business. Everything needs to be billed directly for all costs for wastewater to wastewater, not combining it into the water and sewer, mixing it together. Keep track of what's going on. Then you know what your system is running like, and you have a business plan on how to address it. And you can, as I mentioned several meetings before, you can start watching the trends on your annual expenses. You can see where your problems are. It'll show you that it's continually increasing. Your water loss here in West Helena didn't just happen overnight. It continually increased until it actually went down. And then you had a combination of well problems come in after that. So you had a continual combination of different things happening, but you got to turn the corner. And the first corner is you got a well. Now let's get the plans for the treatment plant and lines in place, get them in there and get this thing funded, because you need to have it done. That 73% will drop. I can assure you. The leaks we helped fix, when you dig it up, you had a clamp here and the leak was in the middle. When you're running into stuff like that, long-range plan says you should have had that replaced already. Your other problem in your system is you've had so many different people lay new lines and tie lines in together. They never abandoned nothing. So your system is harder than any system we've ever worked on to isolate and shut off a section, because you're looped every which direction. And now a lot of your valves don't shut all the way off. And we can hear that going through the valve. We know that's a fact. But it'd be a lot simpler if we could go back and valve everything off. You ultimately might end up with a whole new distribution system just because of the valving issues. You know, I said when you eliminate your lines on galvanized, you need to cut and cap. If you do that, you'll never have to worry about that line leaking again because it's out of service. But if you just lay another line there and tie into that, you've still got that other line that's active. It's a problem. So you've got to start eliminating those problems in your construction. Your engineer can design that and make that happen. But you got a long hill to go. You just started. You're at the bottom of the hill and you got a long way to go.
Yes, sir. And as to the actual cost of this, one of the issues that we discovered along the way is that everybody thinks the $200,000 that we received is sufficient to fix it. But to be clear, the 11 million is just the beginning.
And we're talking water on that.
Just water. The 11 million is just the beginning. We're going to need millions more to entirely replace the system.
Right, but you got to prioritize what you think should be done first, and that's the key. You need to start doing that.
And I just want to be clear that people don't think that even the 11 million fixes everything. It does not. It's just the beginning.
Correct.
You won't really know till your engineer can lay everything out and provide you a good cost estimate for fixing the things that need to be fixed the soonest. I mean, what Dennis said, I mean, we recognize that your distribution system is in really bad shape. I mean, that's why you've had 3 emergencies roughly in a little over a year.
Yes, sir.
And so, I mean, prioritizing getting those lines fixed seems critical to me, and valves and the plant. And I mean, because you're in a lot of ways, I know you have no choice but to fix the leaks, but you have to get out of leak fixing mode and get into pipe replacement mode. You have to. Otherwise, you're going to spend all your money fixing leaks.
And the other challenge you got is what the mayor mentioned, keeping adequate pay licensed operators. As you know, you're under consent administrative order now on that. That has to be done.
And I'm glad that you all are here to explain that, because this is something previous administration we should have had something like this, a discussion, so the city council, everybody know what's going on at the same time, because now you all know for sure what me and Mr. Valley been trying to tell everybody, that these issues exist. Now you see it and you hear it. And I hope the listening audience will take heed, and we gotta make some strides toward the right way with raising rates. And I'm certainly gonna take what they said to heart and make sure that the water department, Mr. Rose, Mr. Valley, start getting on these plans to do things that we need to do, because we need water and sewer. We can't attract anybody with hospital, chemical plants, especially our residents, nursing homes. All these people who are looking at us here that you're having water trouble, they're gonna go the other way. And we want them to come this way. So Gentlemen, I thank you all, Mr. Cockledge, Mr. Sternberg.
Mr. Mayor, Mr. Sternberg and Mr. Cole-Glazier, I panned the audience for questions because they're not on the agenda, they're not allowed to speak. And there was one concern that was for you, Mr. Cole-Glazier, I'm gonna ask it. And then Mr. Sternberg, if after the meeting you'll meet Mr. Meadows at the beard, and he has a financial question, I think that you can just help him answer that. But if I remember the question right, it was about us qualifying for that principal forgiveness.
Since it's already been approved, would we still qualify for it?
Not for the 11, because one, we did that in February.
Right.
We didn't have principal forgiveness dollars to give out. We get that from direct federal funds. We only do that one time a year in November. So there is no going backwards in time to forgive anything in the past. This would be for future funding requests that you would qualify for principal forgiveness. All of that depends on how much direct federal funds we receive and then the number of projects requesting principal forgiveness. Because even though you would qualify at 1.25, we go off a funding ranking sheet that's done by the Department of Health for water systems. And so, there's 900 and something projects on there. I can't tell you where you are on the list. I would assume that you're probably up there in the top 25% if I had to guess. That's just a guess. But we fund until we run out of money on the principal forgiveness side, and it's not 100%. We do a 75-25, a 50-50, and then a 25% principal forgiveness, 75% loan. So it's a loan principal forgiveness combination if we do happen to award principal forgiveness, but that's only one time a year, and it does not go backwards in time.
So the 16 that we're looking for, if we get our rates, we're looking to, if we get our rates up to qualify for the 16 million. So we already got an application in for the 16 million.
So you might be, if you qualify at 1.25, which you'd have to elevate your rates, then depending on how much principal forgiveness dollars we have and how many project requests are ranked higher than yours, that you potentially could get some principal forgiveness dollars.
So Ms. Mills already has a request in.
She does. So the deadline to submit a request to even be considered was in September.
Okay.
Because we have to have time to process all of those applications. And I think, again, we have 70 some odd applications for principal forgiveness or for funding.
So we need to get our rates up right fast so we can qualify.
I would say that you need to have your rates up to where you would qualify, because right now you don't.
Because that 16 million can, start replacing some more things. So just be ahead of the game. Thank you, Ms. Mills, for getting that done for us.
I just wanted to say thank you too, Ms. Mills, for coming. Yeah, she's super instrumental, I know, with a lot of the paperwork and other things. I want to say thanks too. Glad you're here.
All right. Now, we have one item of business that we need you all to take care of, if you will, before you adjourn. And that is a permit from Estella Graham. They've been doing it for several years on Hernando Street, the family reunion, where they are permitted to block off the street during the Blues Fest and their family reunion. It's been signed off on by the department heads, and this council has granted it at least 3 years. 4, Ms. Davis tells us. So and that's going to happen before you meet again. So we need you to give them a thumbs up, a thumbs down today, if you will.
Ms. Miller moves to approve the permit. Mrs. Harris seconds the motion. In discussion? Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Ms. Davis?
Yes.
Ms. Harris?
Yes.
Mr. Etherly?
Yes.
Ms. Miller?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
I'm going to adjourn. Oh, no, I can't. Somebody.
I move.
Second.
I'm gonna say-